do pick up, you may have seen this ad in the paper, we have 3 loans now that are running up to $1 million with no points at basically conforming rates. We just blew right through them. We'll do $1 million to 4.25 right now. We have here today Anna Makos, Chris Sullivan, and Ellen McSweeney. Most of the lenders with the bank. It all gets done basically between the 4 of us, and Denise over in Ipswich too. Thank you very much. Enjoy your day.
Thanks, Mark. All right. The reason we're all here is for the Local Historical Study Commission presentation to us to bring us up to speed on what is afoot with the overlay. It's an opportunity for you to listen and learn, and for you to provide them with your insight as well. We have with us today Doug Bullock, Doug Lousy, and Sarah White. Doug?
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank Greg and Sue and the association for having us here this morning to give you a brief overview of where we've been, where we're headed, and then get hopefully some good comments, constructive comments, and some questions and answers. I'm sure you have a lot of questions on this. This morning that we have Sarah White, who's our chair. She typically would be talking. She's more prettier than I am, obviously. Doug Bullock. Also,
am I prettier than you?
And Ed Ramsdale. I'm not sure Ed's prettier. And Sarah, Margaret Welch, who's not here this morning. Anyway, let me start by saying that our committee, which is the Local Historic District Study Committee, was appointed about 4.5 years ago by Mayor Moak. At that time, a few folks from the Planning Board, from the Historic Commission, and others approached the mayor because of the perceived need for an overlay district, historic district in Newburyport. And that was based too also on the 2000 master plan, which I don't know if you've had an opportunity to read that or be involved in it. And there was also a 91 preservation plan. The federal government actually saw a need to put a protection, what they felt protection, that's the National Registry District, on about 2,800 homes. And that district runs from Ashland down to Marlborough, from High and stuff down to the Merrimack. That, they saw that need because of the large number of period homes in Newburyport, particularly federal period homes, which I understand we have more of than any place else in the country other than Savannah. That overlay, however, does not protect any of the structures in Newburyport. All it does is allow some oversight on any federal projects that might come in, like a highway or a federal structure. Our committee meets on the 2nd and 4th Thursday of the month. We've been meeting, it's a working session. The public is always invited. The agendas are always posted. And we meet at 7:30 at the police conference room. So if you're interested, please attend. Sarah, Margaret, and myself have been on this committee since its conception. And the composition of that committee has changed over time, and we're fortunate to have Doug Bullock and Ed Ramsdale at this time, because we're currently in the studying the process and the administration of it. So having folks who's the chair of the ZBA, Doug and I have been on the Planning Board, Margaret's on the Historic Commission. The permitting process that is proposed, should this be adopted, is important for us to make sure that we can expedite this process through the city. Now, we came together, initially we were guided by state statute, Mass Law, Chapter 40C, which provided us the steps in the process that we should follow to make this happen. And one of our first tasks was to develop and distribute a survey, which we sent to all the property owners within the National Registry District. At the time, we didn't have any idea what the boundaries would be. So we wanted to get feedback, and we received a 37% return on that, which is phenomenal in terms of a survey. All this information, by the way, including the ordinance and the guidelines, which we've been drafting, and it's a continuous work in process since the beginning, is available on our website. If you go to the city's website and look at the planning office page, you'll see a little tab that says Local Historic District Study Committee. On there, you'll find all these documents, as well as other links and other information pertinent to the proposed district. In drafting the ordinance, which is the main instrument that the City Council will vote on, requires a supermajority. That's 8 of 11 city councilors to pass. In drafting that and drafting our guidelines, we looked at a sampling of the probably 250 local historic districts in the Commonwealth. We looked at similar towns and cities. We addressed, we had conference calls with them. We worked with the planning staff and developed our initial drafts of the ordinance and the guidelines, which we then sent out to others in the community, other stakeholders in the community for a peer review. We also met with other commissions, the Planning Board, the ZBA, the Historic Commission, to get input. And we've had a number of information sessions with the public, as well as our committee meetings, to take as much input, constructive input, and incorporate it within these documents to make it pertinent to the city report. Now, the ordinance as it's proposed is only minimally restrictive when compared to other cities and towns who have similar types of local historic districts. The Commission would review only the external elements, the external architectural elements that's visible from the public way. There's no interior restrictions, and we basically had, I would say, 3 objectives in mind. One was to limit the demolition of historic structures in the city. Currently, the 1-year delay ordinance, demolition ordinance, isn't necessarily providing us the necessary prevention of destruction. It's just that you pull a permit and you can wait a year and then destroy the home. And we've lost hundreds of homes since the beginning of the 1900s. The second was to provide homeowners, property owners, with some level of guidance in replacing historically significant architectural elements in their home. You'll see over time a slow, methodical destruction of these key elements, whether they be dental work in the house, doors, windows, sidings, masonry work, that have been around for hundreds of years. And many times that happens only from a lack of knowledge or experience in terms of what to do. And a lot of times things are done, they actually devalue the house and don't keep and restore the necessary structures that make it important. And third, we want to ensure that we encourage new construction, but that new construction be compatible with streetscapes and supports the historic character of the neighborhood. Now, we analyzed approximately about 10 years of permit data from the building department when we drafted our ordinances, and with those 3 objectives in mind, we developed what we have today. We didn't wish to burden the property owner or the commission with excessive amounts of restrictions. And we excluded a number of elements that are actually listed up front within our ordinance. If you go to the ordinance, you'll see that things like re-roofing, and re-roofing was probably the most common reason for pulling a permit. And a lot of homes, a lot of local historic districts actually control roofing, control colors, and other aspects of the home. But we excluded that. We've excluded paint colors, storm windows, landscape features, utilities, walkways, driveways, and what have you. And we also exclude any structure built after 1930 and any normal maintenance and repair of any of the features or replacement in kind. Now, when we looked at the boundaries of what we were proposing, we first looked at the entire National Registry District. We also looked at some other features, such as other areas of the city that are important in terms of its historic character, such as Lower Jefferson Street, where you had the original ferry going back and forth. Curzon Mill, Arrowhead Farm. There's a number of other areas in Joppa, other areas within the city that are important but not contiguous to the proposed district. We also then looked at the original settlement boundaries in Newburyport. That when Newburyport was incorporated in 1764, we looked at it from, I believe, Oakland to Brownfield, and then part of top on the High Street down to the river. Now, in reviewing that, we were concerned that one of our tasks was not to try to burden the city with additional expenses. We wanted to see what resources were available within the city at this point in the planning office to be able to administer a district and not have to burden additional resources. We met a number of times with the planning office staff. We had conference calls with other communities, with their planning office, with district commissions, and as it turned out, we decided to develop our guidelines based on that information as well as the input from the survey that we had. The survey, one of the questions was asking the property owner what areas of Newburyport, and we broke it down into 4 areas: High Street, downtown, North End, South End. And we asked them, what do you think is significant and what needs protection? And we had about a 97%, I think, return that felt High Street needed such an ordinance. And also downtown, I think, was like in the mid-80s or so, followed by the South End and North End. So in that, with all this information, we decided at that time to define the boundaries between Federal Street and both sides of Federal Street to probably Route 1 and part of Winter Street, down from High Street to the water. And that encompasses about 800 structures. Now, today, we had sent the preliminary report, which is a document that goes to the state, the Mass Historic, and they review it, and they took a few, 3, 4, 5 months or so. And they came back with some comments and suggestions, one of which was that we were not restrictive enough. But we incorporated some of those comments that they had that were substantive comments into the document. We've had today 2 well-attended informational sessions. And coming up, and I would recommend people to put this on their calendar, but March 19th, we will have a forum with representatives from Mass Historic Commission as well as representatives from other towns that have experience on local historic districts. And that will be held at City Hall Auditorium on the 19th. And that will be followed up with another Q&A on the 26th. And I think we have some maybe video presentations and other things we're attempting to give as much information and make everyone cognizant of what is being proposed when this goes to City Council. Now, what will happen is the ordinance, as I indicated, is the main document that will be approved or disapproved. That goes to City Council, Planning and Development Committee. We'll have a public hearing. Then we'll go, once maybe some minor changes to that ordinance, and then it will go to a vote at the City Council. We figure maybe May or so would be the timing, depending on how the feedback comes in. Now, I'm sure that many of you have seen a lot of letters to the editor, comments and ideas that have been expressed between those who advocate and are strong property right advocates and those that wish to have more protection and preservation. It is not the intent of this committee to try to support or advocate either in any case of this. Is basically to give you as clear and as comprehensive information as possible, to clear up any misconceptions, and to provide the city with an ordinance which will be something that we can move on and will be supportive for the city. As all of you, I'm sure, have, since you represent the community in terms of real estate, are asking, well, what if you have a seller or a buyer? They're going to probably ask you, what does this do to me? And how is this going to affect me if it's adopted? And although we don't have clear-cut answers to that, because each community may be a little different, it's our experience from the data we have from other communities that it helps to stabilize home values. It helps to, in some cases, actually increase the value of the home. But it's important, I think, that even though you may feel, or the property owner may feel that they want to do what they want within their property, what affects you too is the neighborhood. I mean, other homes around that neighborhood, and what happens to those homes is going to have an impact on your values and on your house. So it's important, I think, to know that when you have a restriction like this, it does provide you protection in terms of what happens within the community. So with this, I'd like to open it up for questions. I think between Sarah and Doug and myself, if there's answers we can give you, we'd be happy to do it here. So, any questions? Yes?
Your list of things that are excluded were pretty notable. It doesn't sound like really there's a lot of restriction intended. If paint, storm windows, reproducing what's already there, landscaping are off the table, what's to object to?
Well, the elements that we want to control are the things that have been around hundreds of years, not temporary structures or things that can change or maintenance. So part of the requirements of the ordinance is to actually list those exclusions. So what's actually included might be our windows, siding, masonry work, chimneys, dental work, moldings, things that are visible, that if we affect them, we put aluminum siding on, we use mortar that has, it's not the correct mortar, it's not lime mortar, old water-struck brick. It can have an impact on the destruction of that property. If you have the original siding, you would be required to repair that siding if possible, to try to maintain it. If you have aluminum siding, which may in fact be destructive, you can put aluminum siding back on. Yes, I think the one.
I have two questions. One is are there going to be changes to zoning? Like if someone wants to add on to their property or condominiumize an existing building, is there going to be any effect there? And the other one is, could you go through the process, say a homeowner wants to do something to their home, what would the process be?
Okay. The commission, only the zoning board can give a use change. Okay, if you want to change a condominium to a single family or change the use, that's the zoning board which would do that. If you were if you had a house, let's say that's within the historic district, and you wanted to make, I don't know, change, let's say the siding, or do something to the siding or the windows of the house, you would obviously go for a permit, right? The building commissioner would have probably a checklist there and says, okay, go up to the planning office. There's a checklist for local historic districts because it's something exterior to the house. If the building commissioner sees an interior thing that doesn't affect the exterior, you'll just get the permit and go. But like upon any permit, you have to go up and get sign-offs from the Treasury, to make sure you paid your water bills and all that kind of good stuff. The planning office would look at the permit to determine if, in fact, this is exterior work visible from the public way. It could be major or minor. They would then send an email or call the delegate or the chair of the historic commission. These are all volunteers, but this is the intent of what we've done on the Planning Commission, is to try to do as much up front as we can. On the Planning Board we did this. And have information on the sessions up front. We would then determine that it's appropriate, is what they're doing is an appropriate feature or change within the context of the ordinance. You would then get a certificate of compliance or certificate of applicability or appropriateness, rather. And then that would go within one session to the board or the commission and be signed off. So, you know, they have that discussion, but they would be signed it off. And then you take that to your building inspector, and that would be basically the end of it. If you had a worst case condition where you wanted to replace a major historic window with an inexpensive plastic window, and I'm sure you get phone calls all the time, people want to replace the windows, and you've got these triple pane windows, and you have to be very cautious of what's being offered. There are some good windows out there from Anderson and Pinnell, but the price, believe it or not, when we've studied this, the cost of repairing an old window, which has hardwood structures that's been around for many, many years, and adding, let's say, a storm window, similar to what's down at the historic Cushing House, it can be something that's compatible, even though it's custom made, it can be actually less expensive than what you might be proposing. Now, if we can move an individual in that direction to try to encourage them and give them some ideas of what to do, they may make that change, and then we just, it'd be no-brainer. Let's assume the worst case where somebody says, I don't care, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and we may deny it. Okay? And I'm not saying we, it's the commission. I won't be on the commission maybe. But if it's denied, you have an appeal process. And the appeal process would be going to the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission, which has an arbitrator. And I don't believe there's a cost necessarily with that. If you don't like that, you can go to the Superior Court, which is typical of the denial.
And this applies to additions and...
Additions, yes. If there's an addition to the house that's visible from the public way, that addition would be reviewed in terms of its compatibility with. And
yeah, if you have a buyer who says, well, I'm going to buy this house, but I'd like to put on a little addition. Well, right now, without an LHD, the buyer's going to have to go to see Gary Calderwood to pull a permit for that. And if it's violating setback requirements, then they'd have to go to the ZBA for some sort of variance. So that's what would happen anyway. And the only addition that this would add to it, so people would be pulling permits anyway for changes to the exterior. And the LHD commission would just be another sign-off on that as to the historicity of what they're trying to do. Does that make sense?
Can I add one more?
Sure.
If I could add a couple things. One, for the area, if this were to pass, the area that the district commission would have purview over, our existing historical commission would go away for that area. So you wouldn't have double commissions to go to. The historical commission would not have purview over the area that the district commission would have purview over. Similarly today, on Fruit Street, the historical commission has no oversight over that. It's only the Fruit Street District Commission that does. So there wouldn't be any sort of double historical commissions to go to. And a quick thing, if I could follow up on what you were saying about windows. A resident of the district who happens to live right next to the mobile station on High Street at the corner of State and High, and then there's a white mansard house right next to it. So they were looking at replacing their windows. So they decided to do an experiment and act as if the district were in place, taking the guidelines that are there currently. And so they called in Pella, and they called in Stark House Joiners, which they do restoration and repair of historic windows, and they make exterior storms. And so they looked at the Pella Architectural Series, and the person who actually came as the Pella representative lives in a historic district in New Hampshire. And he looked at the guidelines as they are right now, and he said this is way less restrictive than what I have where I am, and he was able to use the Pella architectural series, so that Pella architectural series he figured would probably work here as well. So she got the pricing for the Pella architectural, and then she had Stark house joiners come in, and her thought was that it's going to be way more because it's custom. It ended up that with repairing the existing historic windows, creating exterior storms that fit, because we all know those windows, they all have funny, sizes. Creating the exterior storms, and then weather stripping and insulating those windows was less than half of the Pella architectural series. And she has that information ready in hand for me, fortunately, or anybody else who'd be interested in it. So I thought that that was quite interesting to hear. And it's something that we've always known, but to actually have somebody go and do that experiment was very helpful. The other addition is that the R value that you get from using exterior storms, weather stripping, and insulating, ends up, the difference between that and the new insulated windows is negligible. So.
Okay, yes.
Just to follow up on that, the only thing that scares me about that scenario is that I can guarantee that Pella's going to be around in 20 years. An organization that fixes windows is not something that we can rely on year after year after year. So I wouldn't try to sway votes on that argument. I don't think it holds water for the long run.
I understand.
I think
what
we
you're saying.
need to, be assured that if we're going to want to replace the windows at a reasonable cost, that that's kind of outside of the bounds of what your responsibility is as a commission. You can't guarantee to me that I can get windows half price versus Pella, in other words.
I understand what you're saying. I think one of the things also that we probably could use to be cognizant of too is that those replacement windows last about 20 years. When you, and then you're going to have to replace them again. And if you do the if you do the calculations on it, it'll take you about 40 years to gain back the investment cost of those replacement windows from Pella. If you have them restored, and there are Stark house joiners is one, but there are many, many others in the area. So if Stark house joiners is no longer here, their sons don't take it over, there's the window woman, there are people in New Hampshire, there are people all over the place that do it. And when you restore and use storms, you're looking at a lifespan of 50 years minimum of those restored windows. So during the lifespan of your house that you're living there, I mean, unless you live to be like, 90 million years old like Methuselah, you probably will not have to replace those again, but do a little bit of repair.
Did you have a question?
Yes, what kind of assurance would we have about the qualifications of the people who would be determining what kind of mortar you can use for your chimney, or what kind of windows you could use either now or in the future, if these people are going to have control over, what you can and can't do on these particular elements having to do with the exterior of your house?
Yeah, can you, I only caught the beginning of the end of that.
Okay, what kind of assurance would we have that these people who would be making a determination on what elements you can use, on the factors that, are going to concern us,
Sure.
that they know what the heck they're talking about
Sure.
now or later?
So one of the things, the way the guidelines are currently written, is it says, for example, in the mortar question, it says specifically the type of mortar that you need to use and why. And that's based on historical research by the Department of the Interior, the National Park Service. So that is specifically in the guidelines, that this is what you need to use because we know that it's the appropriate mortar to use. We specifically say in the guidelines, for example, not to use the Portland cement that you can buy at Home Depot for, for historic brick, because what happens is the mortar hardens so much that it doesn't, lime mortar allows for the mortar to move when there's movement in the house, and the current cement that often is used hardens so much that it can't move, so therefore when the house shifts, the brick has to move and you have spalling, etc. So, to that point, that's specifically in the guidelines itself, so that is there permanently. The other thing is, too, is that you're required to have historic preservation experts, architects, ideally realtors and lawyers, etc. What we don't want is just to have anybody from anywhere with no experience in anything to be on the commission who doesn't know about any of this stuff. So that's why there are specific requirements in the ordinance itself that require people with historic preservation expertise to be on it.
Yeah, I'd like to add something, because I've got 4 properties in town that would be subject to this, and I wish that there had been an LHD over the past 35 years that I've been here, because my own house on Port Street, I bought it, it had already been butchered in part by the previous owner, and then I did some stuff, kind of half-assed, you know, because I didn't know any better.
On the interior or the
Oh, no, this is
exterior?
all exterior. And, you know, I've done some stuff that I'm kind of embarrassed about now. What the hell was I thinking? And I could have used some guidance. So I perfectly understand a lot of people, you know, don't tread on me, don't tell me what to do with my house. And I understand that. But I'm one who has a lot of skin in the game. And I view this LHD as a resource. And also along the same line, because a lot of people say, well, look, I can be trusted to do what's right with my house. And that's true. A lot of people can be, and a lot of people can't. You know, so, you know, you could spend, or I could spend a lot of money on my house doing it just right, and my next door neighbor could do a really bad job, and that's going to reflect on my house. So,
Take the one at
I have a question from the lender standpoint. A prospective buyer wants to buy a house that needs work through a renovation program, and they've deemed, you know, the FHA consultant has come out there and actually done an analysis of that property to determine what needs to be done to make it livable because it needs work. Now, what transpires at that point? Is there a resource of professionals that can be accessed, like email, phone? Because once they determine what the cost is for the livable aspect of it, changing those windows that the FHA requires, how do we know if, you know, it's going to be allowed? And it's not like something they want to go through the planning commission to find out. They actually want a resource where they can actually call up and talk to somebody right away. Is there a consultant that can come out and advise that client? Because, you know, that property may look good from our standpoint, it's all we need, but they go and do the work and they can't get it done. So is there a resource like that?
Yeah, the commission itself can be contacted at any time. Just contact the planning office and they put you in touch with the chair of the commission or a designated representative, and those people will come out or what have you. And if they don't have the answer to your question, the key thing is that commission has access to a wealth of resources that will come out and on a volunteer basis take a look at something. So that's not a, it's yeah, at your disposal.
Okay, is there a website for that?
Now the commission is not in place, so this is just in process now,
Okay.
okay? So we're still in the process of forming and finalizing what we're gonna propose to city council. So what you would need to do if you want to see where we're at so far is go to the planning office's website and click on Local Historic District Study Committee. But once the commission is in place, if it is approved, then we'll have our own separate website. Not we, they. Will have their own separate website where you can contact them directly. But as it is today, the only locale in Newburyport that has a district is Fruit Street. So what we're talking about here is something that's being proposed, so we don't have it yet. But that will be a service and something that will be available.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Will the
Yes, you had.
demolition delay ordinance go away?
Demolition delay would go, yes, because that's under the purview of the historic commission, and you're not, you know, the local historic district would not be covered by that. It would just, you know, that part of it would go
But
away.
outside of it would still be there.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
What about determining on these architectural features on the exterior? So many, 200-year-old homes have had a variety of upgrades over the years. Things become more fashionable. You start out with a salt box and suddenly it's a Victorian.
It happens.
Everybody has
Yeah.
modernized each generation. So when an owner is wanting to change something, what level does it have to be changed back to the original? Who determines that?
Whatever's there is there. Okay, it's
So it's
cast.
based on what's there
What's there
now.
now, yeah.
So if you have a colonial that was built in the 1700s, and you have an element that is Italianate that's on the front, and you want to update or renovate that property, you're stuck with the Italianate.
I don't know if that's the
I
case,
wouldn't
but
say that
I'm
you necessarily,
stuck with it.
yeah, because we have a lot of properties like Federals on High Street, for example, that have like, say, Greek Revival entryways. And what's important is not to make a house go back to the quote-unquote original. What's important is to retain elements that were very particular to that particular era. So somebody has a Federal, they put on a Greek Revival doorway, awesome. And you want to change that doorway, well then you have a discussion, but it doesn't mean go change it back to the colonial doorway. So there's no emphasis on you must put it back to whatever the original was. It's very important to see how that house is transformed over the centuries, because that tells a lot about how the community's changed, society's changed, architecture has changed. So you wouldn't necessarily be stuck with that Italianate doorway necessarily, but that would involve a discussions.
Well,
a review.
that is the position of what was GNAR Historic New England anyway, so you're just repeating what has been historically solid.
Yep.
And, yeah,
Yep.
so there's no new business here.
No.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just have a question about the timing of all of this. I mean, I think everyone is in favor of preservation. I mean, you don't want to kill the goose that laid the golden eggs here in Newburyport. But if you are going for a permit, it's bad enough if you already live in a house and you have to go through the processes. But if you're buying a house and possibly living somewhere else while you have the work done, this is a volunteer board, right? And I just wondered how often they might meet, how long it's going to take to get a decision. Is it going to be once a month? If I don't get on the docket this month, am I going to have to wait another month?
In the ordinance, if you read it, I think it says that the board will meet twice a month. There are timelines that are controlled by Chapter 40C, and you have to meet certain guidelines. If it's not met, you might get an automatic hardship and might be granted. So the commission must act within a certain time frame.
And to add to that, too, this commission would function just like any other board or commission in town. The ZBA meets regularly, the planning board meets regularly, historical and conservation, they meet regularly. This is not an ad hoc citizens board, it would become part of city government. So, and it would meet, like Doug said, on a regular basis. And right now it's proposed twice a month. And, you know, just like the zoning board sometimes has to hold special meetings because they have something special going on, then that opportunity is there as well. And just like the zoning board has specific timelines that they have to render a decision by, or else the person can then automatically do that project, the same holds for, would hold for the district commission as well, and that's by state statute.
Yes, Bill?
Will the level of restrictions ever change? Because you did mention that the state said that it was not restrictive enough, and they wanted you to make it more restrictive. Is that right?
Yeah, well, that was an observation that they had when they looked at it. But to make it more restrictive would be a change in the ordinance requiring the same level of approval, 8 of 11, to make a modification of the ordinance. That, I can't say what would happen in the future, but it's certainly not our intent to make this any more restrictive than what it is.
And 8 out of 11 is a very high bar to reach, to be honest with you.
But how are you going to make it more restrictive with the recommendation from the state?
No.
No, that state, the state doesn't, you're not required to do anything the state mandates, or not mandates, but recommends.
Basically, their review is advisory only.
Oh, okay.
And when they suggested things to be more restrictive, just said no. It just wasn't, we have to also know what's palatable and what's not, and some of the things that they recommended were absolutely not palatable for this community. And so the state cannot at any time either come in and say, you need to make X, Y, and Z more restrictive. They just can't do that. They don't have the power to do that. So that all that power is not at the state level. So it's a locally run board and ordinance.
Okay.
Under what circumstances would a D&T home be allowed to be taken down?
Were you, oh, okay.
I didn't hear the question, excuse me.
Under what circumstances would an ENT cone be allowed to be taken down? So, a couple of the things would be, let's say it's absolutely unrepairable, and there are houses that are like that. I know that there was one taken down on Vernon Street when Chuck Griffin was doing his work up there. There was a federal that was in such just absolutely horrendous condition from a structural standpoint. It just did not merit retaining. So that would be a situation, and a situation where there's like an overwhelming public benefit. Like, let's say, all right. There's been lots of talks about parking garage. Boy, this is not an area I really want to tread. Parking garage. But all right, let's say the city wants to put in a parking garage, and let's say yes, it's definitely in the public. Let's say it's in the public benefit to do that, and let's say there's an antique house there, because I can think of one of the areas where they've thought about where there is currently an antique house. Well, because the overwhelming public benefit might just be that, it's much better to have, say, a parking garage than to just have that one house standing there. Then that might be another situation where removal of a historic structure would make the most sense.
Can I add to that? So who makes the determination at that point whether that house should stay or go?
That is the commission that would make that determination, and because we would have architects, historic preservationists, people who are expert in building, legal fields, etc.
And realtors.
That they as a group would have the expertise to make that determination if the house is actually reasonably salvageable or if it will go.
So then you get into the debate, right? My engineer says it's not, and your engineer says it is. Then we're at Superior Court, right? Is that what you're saying?
No, if that's the case, then what would happen is that you would go to the Merrimack Valley Planning Authority, because that is the step for appealing a ruling that, say, the applicant doesn't like. Because we don't want people to immediately go to Superior Court, because that's rather a colossal waste of money for everybody involved. So the step would be to go to the Merrimack Valley Planning Authority, and they have experts that they would bring in to make sure that the determination was made not arbitrarily, not capriciously, according to guidelines, and would take a look at the material presented by both sides.
So in the event going forward, this organization is created, would this be the sounding board, obviously, or the support in the event that that investor or developer wanted to buy that property? You guys came in and supported the findings of the investor or the builder?
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand.
You get to a point where the property, you're looking to invest, you have an investor looking to invest in it, that he says, I want to tear it down because I can't save it. The planning board actually says that it can be saved. You folks form this commission, and you come to and you agree with the borrower or the investor. Is that going to hold weight? Is that going to be the swaying vote? Is that going to add? I mean, I'm just trying to get to the value of this particular organization. Is it going to be the support mechanism for somebody to determine whether that house is?
This organization, if you will, it's a city body.
Okay.
Okay, it's not a volunteer group, it's not an advocacy group. If it were formed, it would be a city body, just like the zoning board is and just like the planning board is. So if somebody has come in and before this commission, let's assume the commission is approved, and just for the sake of conversation.
Right.
And somebody has already come in and purchased a property as a P&S on it, and has already, started to go through the process with the planning board and the zoning board, etc. Because they're already in that process, they would not come before the commission. Okay? So let's say somebody buys a property after the commission is formed. Then yes, they would have to come in front of the commission, and the commission would determine whether or not the house is salvageable or not. And it's also not it's not about somebody coming in front of the commission and you saying, yes, no, that's it. It's about a discussion, it's about going out, reviewing the property, it's a back and forth, because the ultimate goal is to make sure that people can actually do their project. But the overriding task of this commission is to protect the historic fabric of the community, which is really what is our key economic driver. So the goal is to protect, but the goal is to also work with the applicant to see, where we can meet in the middle as well.
Thank you.
Will there be any sort of, say, first right of refusal through the city if a historic property is is gonna be sold and the developer says, I'm gonna tear it down, I'm gonna start over, will there be any sort of first right of refusal to the city? Preservation Act, anything?
No, no.
In your travels and discussions with other commissions and communities that have had overlay districts, what have you found this does to the assessments?
Typically, the assessments are not, the assessments were not changed, it cannot be changed by state law. You cannot affect the assessments only because you're living in a local historic district. It's just, you know.
It's just illegal.
Legal aspect.
It ain't allowed, right.
It happened in my community, that's.
You had the assessments went out?
Mhm.
Well, then I would
And
take that.
Did they go up uniformly across the historic district?
No.
Okay.
And it did go down to Boston, and there were all
Right.
sorts of discussions, but it's just a discussion that should probably take place with the assessor before this happens, just to be
Oh, yeah.
clear what's
Oh, don't worry.
going to happen.
Yes.
Yeah, I can assure you of that. Now, just like anywhere, if I make improvements to my house and whatnot, my assessed value is going to go up, naturally. And, you know, if I have a house that's similar to somebody else's in another community, or another, you know, nearby, well, you know guys know how this works. So, you know, likewise, if somebody in, you know, the district is compared with somebody else in the district in that household for a certain amount, I mean, it's just going to work the same way it does now, but as legally, you cannot uniformly raise those assessments. And don't worry, there will be a very clear discussion between the mayor and the assessor and everybody, so everybody knows that that's the case. But yeah, by law, it can't. But that's a good question.
Yeah, we've had a lot of discussion with other communities, both the planning office as well as commissions, and it doesn't appear that there's a lot of, you know, items that go to a superior court. In fact, I don't think any of them that I've talked to have a case. They've always been able to work up front and try to move towards a win-win situation. That being said, you never know. I mean, things can happen.
And if I could add one more thing too, one of the things that's in the ordinance, we can't require people to come for a working session, but it's heavily encouraged before you go and spend the money on architects, before you go and spend the money on, you know, lawyers and all that type of thing, make an appointment to come. Sorry, dude. make an appointment to come in and talk and have a working session with the commission, so that there's a, you know, if there's confusion, so that there's a clear understanding of what the commission would be looking for. The commission would not be designing the project for the person, but like say, okay, this is what you need to think about this, think about that, especially if it's a large project. So before somebody goes and wastes their money on an architect or wastes their money on the lawyer, no offense, not for you, you know, then come in and have that informal discussion, because it's to get to that point where the two interests can mesh.
In a lot of cases, a homeowner will do something within the district that doesn't require any attorneys or architects and stuff. We don't want to be an intimidating board. And what I found on the planning board and on the, you know, ZBA and stuff, people get a little bit, if they haven't experienced that before, get somewhat intimidated. So it's really, we would encourage people to open up to us up front and have a little informational discussion. So when they go before the, you know, a commission, they're not, you know, suddenly fear.
Sorry, if you could excuse me, I have to go to the office, so
Okay.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
I can anticipate a potential buyer having concerns prior to putting in an offer on the property. Anyway, a buyer could have a potential anxiety about whether or not they would be able to do the things that they wanted to do on a renovation of the property within the district. Would there be people in the committee who would be making themselves available, say, during a home inspection period or something like that, to at least verbally allay or confirm those anxieties?
I can speak from the experience I've had when I chaired the planning board and other boards, is that, yes, the volunteers are very proactive in trying to go out and help work with the applicant. So I would perceive this to be the same. And understandably, you know, the market, when you have a local historic district, the market may change. You're going to have folks who are desired to get into it. You're going to have folks that are scared of it. So, you know, it's going to change probably that mix of it. Okay.
Just a quick one, did you say the members are gonna be appointed?
The members are appointed by the mayor, like any other board and commission in the city. It's a 5-member board with 2 alternates. And we would it's encouraged within the ordinance that those members be from within the district. And there's also, there's a limit, there's a number that shall be within the district, so.
How is this going to be decided? Is it going to be put to vote?
Yes,
in the
it's
population?
by state statute, it's going to be voted on by the city council.
By the council, it's not voted on by the residents?
No, it can't be. So, and it's got to be the supermajority of 8 of the 11.
Because it's an ordinance. Yes.
I will speak as a realtor. You know, I'm a preservationist, most serious kind. But I have 3 houses listed now which are major restoration projects, and one which has been restored. The first question 9 out of 10 people ask me when they first come to see an early house is, are there any restrictive covenants in this house? It is the first question. And I certainly believe in what you're doing, but it is, as we all know, it is a #1 question for period house buyers. So I will have to deal with that.
Yeah, we had a home where I have a friend of mine that's a builder who did something on 9 Orange Street. And in order to do that, to get a 6C, and he converted it from a 4-unit apartment to 3. He had to go before the ZBA, the Planning Board, and the Historic Commission for a demolition. A lot of restrictions. Part of the reason for getting a 6C is you have to put, restrictions, and he has restrictions on the interior as well. So he was concerned that this wasn't going to sell, and he was amazed at how fast it went. Once the permitting process was long, and I think that's something we've got to work with in the city, is to try to reduce that period. But as soon as it was up for sale, it went like quick.
You have an emergency corps who can go in, i.e. if it's November and finally the roofer comes, you have an emergency vehicle, as they kind of do on 3rd Street. You can need to make a decision that is urgent in every way.
I think you can, yeah, the chair of the commission can act to say, yes, we need to have an emergency meeting, we need to get a quorum together. Yes, that's true, I think, for most people.
One more question? Anyone?
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.